Gotcha. If you could, yeah, just, yeah, this would be fine. Can you see that? That's okay. This is my title. Why is love so hard when I'm always right? Anybody feel that way? Only some people. Oh, thank you, Chris. Thank you. Chris feels that way. Yeah, when you're always right and this love is so hard, and why don't they understand us? Why don't they just say yes, dear, and go on with it? Right? That's what I'm always hoping for. All right, just to recap a little bit, because you guys are writing a paper, right, on cognitive dissonance in marriage. Anybody in here not writing a paper on this? Oh, you're just here for fun. Okay, good. All right, so what is cognitive dissonance, basically? That you get dizzy if you look at that way. It's an uncomfortable feeling, right, that results from holding two conflicting beliefs. Give me an example of that in a relationship. Give me an example. What about religion? He said religion. Can anybody take it from there? Can you give me an example of cognitive dissonance in a relationship? I thought they were going to discuss this, Tia. Christine.
I think of like when my husband got offered a job somewhere else and I didn't want to move, but I wanted to be supportive. So I was trying to be supportive, but I really wasn't really supportive.
So you failed at it. Is that what you're saying?
I was right to begin with.
You were right, but you were right? Well, what is it? It's also a few other things, right? It's also discrepancy. Doesn't that make you dissonant? It's discrepancy between beliefs and behaviors. Anybody have an example of that? I'm thinking of a movie. Remember the movie with Gloria, not Gloria, what's her name?
War of the Roses?
No, I wasn't thinking of that one. I was thinking more Pretty Woman. Remember Pretty Woman? What was her name?
Julia Roberts.
Thank you. Everybody always remembers that name. I never remember her name. What happened in that movie with Julia Roberts? What was she? She was a prostitute. Was she okay with prostitution? You don't even see the movie. I'm looking at her, she's like, don't listen. Was she okay with being a prostitute? Nope. She wasn't. So what did she do to deal with the cognitive dissonance there? She was a prostitute. She acted like a prostitute. Her thoughts were, no, prostitution's not good. So what did she do to resolve that issue that she had? You remember? What did she not allow the guys to do?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. That was the way she dealt with that cognitive dissonance. As long as I don't kiss them, it's just a job. It's just a John. I'm just having sex. But once I kiss them, what happens? It's not prostitution anymore. It's love, right? Who's a boy in there? Gear?
Richard Gere.
Yeah.
Isn't that like soldiers? Like some don't believe in killing, but they do it if they have to.
Right. That's a good example too. That's not a relationship example, but that's a good example too, right? About soldiers. Absolutely. So what's the last thing? Is the deeper you hold your beliefs, the more likely you are to defend them. Think about being in a relationship. How deeply do we hold our thoughts about what is right in a relationship and what's not? Do we hold them deeply or sort of superficially?
Very deeply.
I hold mine deeply. I don't know about you guys, but mine are very deep, and I am right. Right? Now, just because my dodo husband doesn't believe that I'm right, what happens when he tries to change the way I feel about things? What do I tend to do? Well, you're not there. Why am I asking you? What I tend to do is hold on to him, and then I fight, right? Then in the middle of the fight, you're like, what are we fighting about? Have you ever done that with someone that you loved? I know you're in a relationship. Have you ever fought with someone and thought in the middle of it, what are we fighting about? Okay. Stupid stuff, right? Silly stuff. All right, choosing a partner. Do we use cognitive dissonance in choosing a partner? I just love this. This is from your book, by the way. Your book says John Butler Yeats sent a letter to his son when he was getting married, and he said, marriage is the enforced study of a fellow creature. And I would add to that, whether you like it or not. It's sort of what happens. Right? It's the most intimate of relationships. As your book talks about, it's the most intimate relationships even more than your children. Okay. You usually have an I put subconscious list, but do we have a conscious list about picking a partner? Yeah. Oh yeah, I have students all the time tell me, okay, he must be rich, he must be good looking, he must love me, and he must do everything I say. That's my list, but anyway, that is a very conscious list. But we also have a subconscious list. And what's dangerous about having a subconscious list? Right, and you're not upfront about it. So when I say I'm looking for a husband and I want these things, I also have other things in my head, and I'm not honest about them because I really don't even know what they are. Okay, I don't even know what they are. So they're subconscious, and that makes it dangerous. So how do you use cognitive dissonance when you're choosing a partner? How many of you have fallen for someone, okay, and they don't have everything on your list? Let's go back to my list, because I talked about me. Yes? Okay, how many of you, it was a case for you? All right, I have on my list, what? He must be rich, right? He must be good looking. What else did I have? He must adore me. He must do everything I say. Thank you. That's the most important one. Thank you. That's the most important one. That's my list. What if he doesn't fulfill all of those things?
Doesn't it depend on how strong your feelings are for that person?
That can change things. Or how do I use cognitive dissonance to deal with that? For instance, let's say he's not, what was the first thing, good looking. Let's say he's not good looking.
If he has other good qualities that may balance that out.
I justify it, right? I say, okay, he's not good looking, but that's a good thing, because if he's not good looking, then all my friends won't want him to. Right? So you justify it that way.
He'll get better looking as we get older.
Yeah, and he makes more money. He becomes very good looking, right?
It'll work out.
Very good looking. Well, think about, who was it? Kissinger. Remember Kissinger?
No.
No, somebody older than me. Remember Kissinger? He was a State Department guy, not a good looking guy. Very bright, but not a good looking guy. And he said once, I remember reading that he said that the strongest aphrodisiac is power. So think about all these sort of not good looking people out there who have beautiful spouses. I always think of Keith Richards, I don't know why. But Keith Richards is not a good looking guy. Beautiful ex-model for a wife. How did that work? Was his wife looking for a good looking person? She may have been looking for a good looking person, but she found Keith Richards, who has what? He's got other things going for him. He's got a lot of money, he's got fame, he knows Mick. It's enough for me. So right there, and you do cognitive dissonance to get the other thing. Right? So don't we do this in choosing a partner? Anybody? Yes. All right, let's look at this example, and you tell me. Anne is looking for a man who's financially stable. Everybody in here agree with that? Most people look for someone, yeah, most people are like, yeah. And she starts a relationship with Eric. He's a nice guy, he's an artist, he doesn't make any money. And he has no financial prospects. How does she reduce the dissonance there? What would she do?
He's a nice guy.
He's a nice guy?
One day his art's gonna actually become famous.
One day he will become famous in his art? What else? What else kind of things can you do, cognitive dissonance-wise?
She could tell herself she makes a good living, so that would be enough.
What else? How about if he was really a rich artist, I have all these women fighting me for him. Would that be an example of that? Sure. She persuades herself, how about this one? This is a different one we can come up with. She persuades herself that she's fallen in love. How many people have I heard over the years, I used to be a marriage therapist, over the years, I heard many people come in towards the end of the relationship when they were thinking about divorce and saying, but I fell in love. Fell in love with them. She persuades herself that she fell in love with them, which she cannot predict. Can you predict falling in love with someone? I can't predict it. When the times that I fall in love, it just sort of hits you in the head. You don't even realize it. Or you can't control it, right? So she is not responsible for the choices she's made. How many of us do that? Say, we are not responsible for the choice we make. Or what I hear people say, I had no choice. Whenever anyone says to me, I had no choice, my head always goes, sort of explodes inside. Because inside I'm thinking, we all have choices in everything we do. I'm sorry I didn't get the homework in, I had no choice. Inside my head. We all have choices, right? So she persuades herself that she has fallen in love. How many excuses are used with that fallen in love thing? Ask your parents why they're together. Have you ever asked your parents why they're together? Nobody? You don't wonder? You don't wonder? I guess I was a marriage therapist as a child because I would ask them when I was very little. Why did you guys get married?
I know the first date. My dad said my mom was wearing the shortest skirt in the room.
So your dad had standards. Very good. See what got him. Ask your parents. Go home and say, my teacher said I had to ask you. Why were they together? And how many of them will say they fell in love? And what falling in love does, it takes away a lot of the responsibility for things. How many people know someone who got a job and you ask them, how'd you get that job? And they'll say something like, oh, I fell into it. I just fell into it. It takes the control and responsibility out of it. People really fall into jobs? Not really. They tend to be at the right place at the right time. Know the right people, maybe. So none of this, what I'm trying to say with this is that everybody has a choice. Okay, how about Joe? Let's look at what we picked on the women here. Let's pick on Joe. Joe's looking for a beautiful woman, a beautiful girlfriend. That's all he wants is a beautiful girlfriend. Sounds like a good thing to want, right? Nothing wrong with that. But he ends up having fun, good conversations, and satisfying sex with Jeanette, who is not very pretty, and she's overweight. Y'all know anybody like Joe? This is actually from a true story. And his name's not Joe. He feels torn. He keeps calling her, as there isn't a more attractive alternative at the time. He drifts into a more serious relationship with her. How many people do you know have fallen into relationships this way? Didn't really plan on it, right? But it sort of was, they're there, there's no one else around, I'm lonely, I need sex, yada yada. So it goes on. All right, so he drifts into a more serious relationship with her. How does he reduce that dissonance?
She's not that fat.
When you're having sex, that's what happens, doesn't it? Yeah. Not that bad. What else? A guy. I want to hear from a guy.
I guess since she's not attractive, he's not gonna be thinking guys are gonna be looking at her.
Bingo, that's how a guy thinks, yes. Because she's not attractive, other guys aren't going to be fighting me for her. Anybody else? The girls in here are going, oh, they think that way. Yeah. What else? Anybody else? Well, my answer is, he tells himself it's better to settle for Jeanette because she will be less attractive. You were right. I think like a guy too. I wonder what that says. And the two other men will appreciate him more, okay, because I'm so much better looking than she is. She'll appreciate me more, right? And will be faithful. This is a true story.
Did you go that route?
She's not very smart, Dr. Henry.
Joe's not very smart. You're passing judgment.
He shouldn't think about you that way.
You shouldn't think about women that way? Okay. Do some men think about women that way?
Yeah, but I mean, what's the response to the women in the room about that attitude?
Oh, she's feminist. Okay. Let's get back to it. What is a response to women? Well, how do women feel about that? Is that what you're asking? Women? Another woman?
Some women do the same thing to guys.
Some women do the same thing to guys. Boy, these are really reality-based people in this room. So you think it's all fair? Should this happen?
No.
Dr. Keel says no.
But
Does it happen?
yes.
Humans are flawed. We sometimes we just look at the outside. So
Humans are flawed. Okay? This was just a true story. I wanted to share. But you're right, Dr. Keel.
We'll talk later.
I'm in trouble.
Right.
I'm in trouble. be wrong. Dissonance may make us commit to bad relationships. Has this ever happened? People don't like to be made stupid. Have any of you ever gone with anybody that all your friends say, oh, yeah, stay away from this person, they're no good for you, and you're like, I'll show you. I'll show you, right? Has anyone gone with anyone that all your friends say, oh, he'll do this or she'll do this? Has happened to you?
Several times.
Tell us about one.
One crazy girl, I thought I didn't know what I was thinking. I wouldn't say she was a whore. And I was very sad at the time, so I didn't care. Turned out she kind of ruined my Christmas, ruined my New Year's, spent all my money, and she just kind of
That's a bad time.
and everyone told me it's bad. And
So what was your cognitive dissonance around that example? How did you rationalize it to yourself to continue on with this woman who ruined your Christmas and your New
I
Year's?
didn't think I could get anyone else.
Sad stories. Yes.
Yeah, it was kind of the same thing as his, except
Really? Where are you finding these girls?
it was my
Not in this
first
room.
relationship.
Not in this room. Not in this room.
It was my first relationship.
Oh.
Everyone said she was a sociopath, and that's,
That's even more
you know,
serious.
that's just, I thought that was just a big overstatement or something. So now it lasted for a year and a half.
It's a
My
sociopath.
my Christmas was ruined. My birthday was ruined. I was the one that ended up spending money on that date. And then the dissonance about that,
Yeah.
it was just like, oh, it was my first. Maybe I'm just being an idiot trying to, you know.
So you're blaming yourself.
Yeah, I took my own feelings out of it.
So why did you continue this relationship? Because this was not a year and a half. That's a long time.
Yeah.
Why did you continue with that relationship? What did you tell yourself? Even though people are saying she's a sociopath.
I was like, maybe I could, you know, maybe that's just other people, people she doesn't like. I didn't really hear her side of these things, why people said these things. I was just like, oh, kids are mean.
They're
stuff
wrong.
like that, yeah.
They're wrong. I'm right. Right? That's a dissonance right there.
Yeah.
That's a really
I feel you,
easy
buddy.
one.
I feel you.
That's another one over here. My gosh, all these people. That's really easy dissonance is to say, you're wrong, I'm right.
Yeah.
Okay, in relationships, and that's very typical. Your friends are wrong, but you are correct. Can and should parents, are there any parents in here? A couple of parents, okay. Should you interfere with your kid's choice of a partner?
Only if safety is involved.
Only if safety is involved. Do you think it'll work?
No.
So, yes, I will interfere if safety's involved. Will it work? No.
That makes it worse.
Yeah,
Parent tries to
Yeah.
say, it's too bad for you. We think mutual rebellion, man.
Absolutely. If the way I was raised, well, my mom was very strict, but if my mom didn't, I always bring them home, you know? And if my mom didn't like them, I stayed with them. If my mom said, oh, he's such a good boy from a good family with good manners, I'd say, bye. Because
it's different with anything your parents say, because you're always told, it's kind of like you're supposed to learn from your parents, but you're also supposed to challenge, try to make new things. So children automatically, if your parents are trying to tell you something, they will not listen to what they say. But I know for a fact that if my mom tells me something, I won't listen to her. But if my grandma turns around and says the exact same thing, I will probably do what my grandma
So
says.
you listen to your grandma.
Just because it's not my mom, it's that barrier.
Well, then your mom and grandma need to talk.
They do.
Okay.
They do, but it was kind of funny because my mom just pointed out that time, she's like, you know, you're doing exactly what I said just 3 months after I said to do it. And I was like, well.
Your mom shouldn't bring that up. She should just smile to herself and go, yeah. Because she shouldn't let you know that you've done that.
You figured it out after
You
a while.
figure it out after time. Why when parents tell you to go with someone, you don't like them? Why? What would be the cognitive dissonance here? In my case, where my mom says, oh, I like this boy, nice manners, and I say, I don't like him anymore. What was the cognitive dissonance there?
Because you feel like your mom likes it?
Hmm?
You feel like your mom likes it?
But what was wrong with my mom liking them?
I don't know, you don't want to be in a relationship with who your mom likes.
Because
Rebellious.
rebelliousness might be part of it. Plus, how many of you, when you teenagers thought your parents were cool? Anybody? And the older you get, the more you think, hey, my parents were a lot smarter than I thought. But usually when you're a teenager, anything they liked had to be wrong. If they liked a certain kind of music, oh, I don't like that kind of music. It's like they're just not cool when you're a teenager. And then the older you get, it's a little different. But yeah, it's like whenever parents say something, does that happen to you with your children? Okay. And you are very cool, right? I mean, it has nothing to do with...
Certainly.
Absolutely. Our kids are wrong. Our kids are terribly wrong. Yeah? Mm. Oh, I'm sorry.
When I came up, I just laughed at myself because my mom is very strict
Mhm.
about couple dating, especially since I'm only 17 still.
Oh.
But it was funny because she's very strict, but as I got older, I was like, my gosh, she's so right, because she actually did save me from a lot of heartbreak in the end. So.
And you're 17 and you're saying this? You are so mature, yeah. I was 40 before I started doing that.
So that's why I love that point, because
It's so true, right?
Yeah, and that is, when you said, why do you go against your parents, I never really thought of that, because what reason is there to actually go against your parents that you would have so much rebellion? There's
no logical point.
There's no logical point. That just occurred to me, so I had an aha moment.
Hey! Yeah, because your parents have had the experience, they've gone through this. What I found out later when I grew up and became an older person was my mother said that she went through several bad, and she would see that in these guys and think, oh my God, I don't want that for you. I don't want you to suffer
My
through
mom
that.
always said, been there, done that, so I can keep you from doing that.
Well, I told my mom she didn't know psychology very well, because what she should have done is the opposite. Is said, oh, we love this biker with the long hair and the Harley. We love this guy for you. And then I wouldn't have liked him, so. Instead of doing the opposite, right? Okay, let's talk about infidelity. Yay! Infidelity. That's where we see, now, if we see ourselves as good people, and that's the whole premise in this book, right? Is we tend to see ourselves as good people, and then these other things happen. So how do you deal with the cognitive dissonance there? You see yourself as a good person. How do you resolve this dissonance you may encounter when you have an affair? Do good people have affairs?
No.
Okay. Tell us, John.
I mean, they're not supposed to.
Okay.
That's what I meant.
Okay. All right. Everybody else is like, yeah, why not? I like the way you think, though. So you think of yourself as a good person. Are you taught that having an affair is a good thing to do?
No.
I should have put it that way. Of course not. So how do you deal with the cognitive dissonance when you have an affair? Christine.
My ex-stepmother blamed it all on my dad. She's like, he didn't love me enough, he didn't give me everything I wanted, he didn't treat me the way I deserved to be treated, so I had to go elsewhere to get what I needed.
Yeah.
I think the number one thing to do, yes, go ahead.
I'd say this, the situation would even be even easier is if your partner cheated on you first, and then you went cheated on him.
Retaliation affair, yeah, that's
Yeah.
what they call retaliation affair. Playboy magazine, I can't remember when it was like in the 90s. They had this huge article on the different kinds of affairs. Really interesting, went in depth, was based on a lot of research, if you want to look that up. But anyways, infidelity, yeah, I think the best thing to do when you have an affair is to blame your spouse, right? Because if you're a good person, you wouldn't normally do something like this. I needed more sex and you were willing to give me. If you cared about me more, this would never have happened. These are all, by the way, clients that I had. Some of these, I went through my notes from back in the day. This is some of the things that I've written about. They had said, it's your fault for taking me for granted. That's a big one. And if you loved me more, you would have noticed that I was having an affair. Very common for people who have an affair is blaming the person, the victim by saying, and you didn't even notice that I was having an affair? If you loved me, you would have noticed.
People are sneaky.
Yes, they are.
You can't always tell.
No.
It's not something to see off right after that. Especially, I mean, if you're having an affair, you're not going to be exactly open about it. You're sneaking behind the person.
And that's the funny part about this to me, weird part, is that they were sneaking around and then upset when you didn't notice that they were having an affair. Like, but you were sneaking around. You weren't doing it in front of me. Then I could tell you what happened. It wasn't in front of me. It was, yeah. But these are all, blaming your mate's number one excuse when people have, when people are caught having an affair, blaming the mate's the number one reason. Now, some people will blame the relationship and say, oh, we have a bad relationship anyway, kind of a thing. There's also a lot of affairs with people who are thinking about getting divorced, you know, at that point in the relationship, or breaking up. You don't have to be married to have an affair. You can be with someone. But they're thinking about breaking up with this person, and so they have an affair to try the waters. Does that make sense?
To see if you break up with that person, if you can find someone else.
Yeah, to see, because when you're with a person for a long time, you know they love you and they, you know, have sex with you or whatever, but it's because they're married to you. You want to know, how attractive am I to other people? What's out there? What's available? So it's sort of like looking at a menu, you know? And so a lot of people will have an affair just to try the waters, to see if they can, what it would feel like. Meanwhile, they're still married or with someone. Is that right? No. But you're a good person.
If people make mistakes.
Not anymore. But the funny thing is, you don't think that you're not that you're a bad person.
You're not going to notice that they're having an affair because you're supposed to trust yourself.
Well, and I don't know about you, but all of you who are married or have a relation, or those of you who are in a relationship, you're here now. Where is your significant other? You think? People ask me, where's your husband? At work, I think. As far as I know, that's what I trust. I trust him to be at work. Now that you mention it, I'm wrong. So you think that they're at work, right? Absolutely. If people want to have an affair, there's ample opportunity. Ample opportunity. Now, people who travel for work have even more opportunity, and that's actually number one number of people having affairs are people who travel. Now, having said that, I don't want you to go home and say, Dad, I know you travel for work. I know you're having an affair because my teacher said. No, I didn't say that. But I said that the number one group of people who have affairs that get found out are people who travel. Because it's a lot easier, right? It's a lot easier. The opportunity. Now, these excuses that you have for blaming your mate, they could be based on a little bit of truth. Yeah, maybe the person is taking you for granted. I mean, how excited can you be after being married forever and ever every time they walk in the door? Oh, what's so excited you're home? Or, hi, babe, how you doing? You know, what's it that you need? It also allows a cheater to blame their bad behavior on someone else. So cognitive congruence can be established. It's easier to blame it on someone else. Another thing that happens, and it's not very common, but it does happen, is people who have affairs will blame it on the person they're having an affair with. Isn't that low?
Like they seduced me, that kind of thing.
Yes, they seduced me. They were wearing a shorter skirt in the room. How could I not? We got drunk. Being drunk is considered a very common excuse. We got drunk, we got high. Because what happens when you're drunk or high? No one here knows. Huh? Your inhibitions go down. Right. It's easier to fall into things you shouldn't be falling into, right?
Maybe someone you spend a lot of time with.
Well, that's the, thank you for bringing that up. That's what there's also a difference between different kinds of affairs. But one of the big differences is the physical affair where you have sex with someone and the emotional affair. You know what an emotional affair is? An emotional affair, you do not have sex with the person. But you have it could be a coworker that you are like, sort of like what they call work marriage. A work marriage, you're really close to this coworker, you have lunch with them all the time, you talk about stuff, you have problems with your husband, so you come and talk to them about it, they come and talk to you about their relationship. That's called an emotional affair, where you're emotionally overly tied to someone, okay, but you're not actually having sex. And most people will say, what, is that okay or not?
They could say it's okay. I mean,
Is that okay or not?
It'll seem like they're just talking.
Why is that not okay? Did the guys say it wasn't okay or the women? Did you say it was okay? You said, Most guys, thank you for saying
I
that,
mean-
because most men say an emotional affair is okay, it's not an affair. Most men are more tied to what?
Yeah.
If their wife or their girlfriend is having sex with someone else, that's wrong, that's not right. But, oh, if there's this guy at work that you have lunch with and you pal around with, you talk about the kids with, I'm fine with that. Guys, women said no. Women are more tied to the emotional,
They don't
right?
want they don't want their men spending too much time with someone else.
Even if they're not having sex.
Like, you're not supposed to, like, you're supposed to talk about this stuff with me, you're not supposed to talk about this every day.
And it's broken down by gender, usually. I mean, there's exceptions to every rule. But most women, if you say, oh, your husband is having an emotional affair with someone, not having sex with them, but they're like, you know, like a couple almost at work, and they go together everywhere, and they have lunch, the wife will go, he's having an affair.
You're gonna have your friends though.
Friends are different than an emotional affair. Okay? What is the difference? I have a lot of friends here at work, a lot of co-workers at work that are friends, and I pal around with them at school, but I'm not having an emotional affair with anyone. That's where you're like focusing on that, where people in the office will even say, oh, they're a couple.
That's true.
That's
Yeah.
pretty much
There's
everybody
something
now.
more.
It's
Huh?
Pretty much
maybe-
every friend has another gender to go with like, man, you're doing that girl, aren't you? Like, we're just friends. I don't-
Oh, that gets into a whole different lecture about can men and women be friends. Start that, because that'll be another 2 minutes. But emotional affairs, yes,
I
sir.
think it would be difficult to have an emotional affair with a woman because it leads into more intimate, I mean, in my opinion. No?
Yeah, it would be, it's an intimate relationship, that's what it is,
No,
but
no,
it's
but
not
it might
sex.
lead to something else.
Oh, it may lead to
Yeah,
sexual.
I mean-
Oh, yeah, emotional affairs sometimes do lead into sexual, but sometimes there are people who have had emotional affairs for years.
I know some
And
of
it
my
stays
friends,
right
you know,
there.
they started a platonic relationship with girls, you know, and they end up, you know, having sex with them. So
It can be, yeah, that can happen also, but not always.
most of the time.
Men think that way more.
Oh, really?
There are a
Okay.
lot of women that say, oh, you know, when you tell them what an emotional affair is, they'll sit there and go, oh, I've been having one of those for years and didn't even realize it. Because we're not having sex. As long as we don't have sex, you know, my husband thinks it's okay. Can that emotional affair become a physical affair? Absolutely. Sir, next.
Oh, yeah, I was gonna say, like, I guess sometimes certain gestures and, you know, like space, like, you know, intimate space, social, public space, things like that would, like, you know, trigger somebody to think, oh, it's emotional affair, because you would normally, and like comparing it with that and to a friend, normally it's not so close like that.
Right. You can tell
Unless
by
it's a really, really
you see
good
people
friend.
standing and being real close. And
Yeah.
think, yeah. A lot of people who are emotional affairs don't even really realize it. Don't really realize it until that person goes away or something happens and they like fall apart. You're like, why am I feeling so bad about this person that had such an emotional affair with this person? But that's on an intimacy level, not having to do with sex. Infidelity. Only about 31% of marriages survive after an affair is discovered. So what this tells me is what? Hide your affairs well. That's what it tells me. So 31% of marriages survive after an affair is discovered. Now, they say it survives, but many of them will have divorces down the road where they just couldn't work it out. You know? It also depends a whole lot on what the power issue is in the relationship. Yes, TJ.
There was like this 71-year-old man and who was married to his wife for like 50 years, and he found out that she cheated on him like 20 years ago, and he like divorced her.
He divorced her right then.
Yeah.
He couldn't live with it, could he?
No.
Couldn't live with it. You know, some people just can't live with it. For instance, when people are caught having affairs, usually, and this is not always, of course, usually women want to know what from their husbands when they caught their husbands affairs. Huh? What? No. After they found out that they were sleeping with someone else. What's the one of the number one questions women
Did he love
ask?
her?
Who said that? Yeah, bingo. Yes. Do you love her? Why is that so important to women? We just talked about it.
We're emotional.
The emotional part. A man When they find out that their wife had an affair, usually number one question out of there is, did you have sex? And if the answer is yes, what's the next question? Huh? Not if you love them, no.
Why?
Many times?
How good was it?
A man answered it. How good was it? What is he doing? He's comparing himself to that man. Is he better at sex than I am with you? And that's what will break up a man's. Men are less tolerant of their women having sex than women are of men having sex. We're more concerned about the love issue. You know, if he says, oh, it was, you know, I was on a trip to Minneapolis and it just happened, we met in the bar, we got drunk. Women are more likely to forgive that than men, usually. Okay? Now, also, women have traditionally been more okay with forgiving that when they were dependent financially on the husband. Nowadays, what's happening, ladies? Y'all are doing it. What's happening with women in this country?
More independent.
We're becoming more independent, thank you. Yes, so we'll have less of a reason to have to put up with certain things, right? In my mother's generation, women either put up with it or got divorced, which was not a cool thing, and financially it was really a problem. So nowadays that we're more independent, we're finding that we have more choices, but also that more women are having affairs now. Not good news, guys, sorry. Yeah, they're starting to do it too. About 2/3 of cases, marital problems are the effect and not the cause of infidelity. Does that make sense? Doesn't it make sense? 2/3 of cases, marital problems are the effect of infidelity. You have infidelity and you have marital problems, not the cause of it. Okay, it's the effect of it. Usually things are not going well in a marriage if people have affairs, unless it's like a one-night stand kind of a deal where it doesn't get replicated. It just happens once, it was a mistake, oops, my bad, that kind of thing. Most common reason for infidelity? High opportunity. That's what they have found is the #1 reason. With a high opportunity. So give me some sense, where would you have high opportunity?
Workplace.
Workplace? Unless you work in a place where it's, you know, like an elementary school, which is mostly female, right? What other places? Workplace, what else?
Hotel.
Hotels? People are at conferences. Conferences is a big one. Conferences is a real big one. But the workplace also, especially if you have people working together very closely. Yeah? So most common reason for infidelity. Are there any questions about this? No more infidelity questions? It's such a depressing topic, isn't it? Move on with it. All right, arguing. Anybody do this? Nobody argues in their relationship? Who in here has a relationship where they don't argue? Really?
Well, now, yeah. No, we just don't care anymore. Like,
Oh, well, then you're not in a
do anything.
relationship.
They don't do anything that makes something mad. And like, as long as you don't cheat on me or stab me back, we're
You're very laid back. Is that?
good.
And you've had a relationship, this relationship for how long?
About 4 months now.
And it's a good relationship? I think it's been good. Are you more than friends? Are you more than friends? Because usually, people who are in relationships will argue about really stupid stuff.
I know we're together.
Anybody in here argue about stupid stuff? Give me an example of stupid things you argue about. Anybody?
Facebook.
You argue about Facebook. What about Facebook do you argue?
The friends that are on Facebook.
Oh, he doesn't like all the friends that are on your Facebook.
Vice versa.
Okay.
Instagram, liking another girl's picture.
Oh, it's all this high technology stuff. I don't believe in any of that.
Jealousy.
What?
Jealousy issues.
Jealousy around technology? I mean,
No, about like
oh, he looks at somebody else.
the other way around. He's afraid of other guys.
Oh, and you can't look at other guys. Okay. Anybody else?
Celebrities.
Celebrity. You argue about celebrities.
Yeah. We can talk about, Nicki Minaj, people like that. We'll be completely, I don't remember some, but we just be like completely, like we have like complete opposite views about people. She'll say Justin Bieber's this and this. I really won't care about him.
Yeah?
I'll say Nicki Minaj is this, this, and this, and she'll be like, what the hell are you talking about?
Yeah, what's
She's
wrong
this,
with
this,
you?
and this, yeah.
And what's wrong with you because
Uh-huh.
I'm right?
Yeah.
And you don't have my opinion, so you're wrong.
Mhm.
How many of you ever get into arguments where it boils down to, I'm right and you're wrong and you're an idiot for not seeing it? Yeah, yeah, very common, right? And that's how we deal with the cognitive dissonance. I'm smart, I know this stuff. You don't agree with me, you're an idiot. There's something wrong with you. Give me an example.
Being right in math questions.
Okay. But that you can find out, right?
Yeah, but still, even after you prove it, you're like, no, I'm
Oh,
still right.
they will not realize that they were wrong on that math question. Wow, that is really strong when there's, evidence. I'm thinking more about, yes,
Religion beliefs.
religion and beliefs. That's a good one. Any of you thinking about getting into a long-term relationship with someone know that religion is one of the big things that people argue with in a relationship. And if you plan on having children, you may want to deal with that before you get married. The problem with people getting married many times is they fall in love, right? Which is a very emotional thing. And they don't talk about certain things before they get married, right? You give, how are we going to do the kid thing, Also about money. One of the biggest things that people argue about in marriages is money. Not how much money, because everyone has a certain pot of money. You could be a rich person and you still only have $10 million. It's $10 million. The rest of us may have a little bit less than that, right? And it's not so much about the amount of money. What are you spending your money on? This has broken up relationships all over the world. I think it's important to have fancy cars, and my husband says, no, a house is what we need. How are we going to reconcile that? Unless you're willing to talk about it beforehand.
Yeah, I mean, because I feel like a relationship, it's like a job interview. It's like you're not just gonna automatically get it. Love, that's probably just
you have to go through several interviews.
that's I feel like love is the emotional part, but then when you learn all this, it's like, oh, is the emotional part still there? If it is, then yeah, we can get married.
But you have to go through all those little interviews of finding out stuff. Do people do that? You know the number one thing people do not talk about before a marriage? Money.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's a point where people get married and they have no idea what the other person has. They have no idea what their debts are. Guess what happens when you get married? You've got debts, if you have debts. But people don't talk about it. Why do people not talk about money before they get married?
They're gonna think they're not good enough.
It's not sexy, right? It's not loving. It's very cold. And there are a lot of people that were raised with the idea, I was raised with this idea in my family, I never knew what my father made until I snuck into his office and got a paycheck stuff. But in my house, it was, you do not talk about money. It's low class to talk about money, right? So you never talk about money. So if you come from that kind of a family where you don't talk about money, why would you ask this person you're about to marry about money? Which you really need to, because that becomes one of the big issues when you get married. Yeah.
I was the opposite. I grew up in a my mom was very reality based.
Oh, your mom's
She goes, this is how the world is, this is how you're going to have to learn to deal with it. And so it was the opposite way. I mean, like, obviously, she doesn't specifically tell me, oh, this is how much you're going to have to make and stuff like that. But she was like, okay, this is how you have to manage your money. This is how you have to learn how to do finances so when you get married, you can, like, you can balance it out with the other person, that kind of thing.
But hopefully they're doing the same thing, because if, there's been many cases of people getting married to people not knowing this and then incurring incredible debt that they did not know that there was. And that's something you just need to talk. Okay, so money's a thing you talk about before marriage. What's another big thing you need to talk about?
Family.
Kids. Do you want them or you don't? I can't tell you how many clients I had that one or the other person did not want to have children, but guess what they said? I'll change their minds. I'll change their minds.
Easy said than done.
Big mistake. Do people change their mind about having children usually? No. No. So talk about, not only about having children, but raising kids. That causes a lot of divorces. How you raise kids. You know, one person is real laid back, okay, the kids, you know, swing from the chandeliers, and the other parent wants them, you know, lockstep, marching to the dining room table. Who's going to win? Good idea to raise a dog first.
Yes.
As a couple, get a dog and see how that works. Okay. Cognitive dissonance works to help marital stress points. Money, big one. We talk about that. Child rearing, how you're going to raise kids, and silly arguing. And I mean silly arguing where you're arguing about whether, I'm trying to think of a argument my husband and I had once. It was so funny, we started laughing, hysterically, both of us, at about the same time, because we realized how stupid it was. We were arguing about whether jalapenos went into this recipe that I was making or not. And I said, yes, I always cut up jalapenos and put it in there. He goes, no, you never put jalapenos in there. Oh, yes, I do. It went back and forth, and we started laughing because it was so ridiculous. Silly arguing. What are you doing when you're doing silly arguing with your spouses? Are you really doing silly arguing? Are you really arguing about jalapenos? Or what are you also doing? You're dealing with stress from the day. Anybody here have a bad day at school? Nobody here had a bad day at school, right? Not in Lone Star. None of you have bad days at Lone Star, right? Every day. Oh. If you have a bad day, then you go home and you just want to rile on somebody. And that's what happened that day we were arguing about jalapenos. We realized, because I immediately said to my husband, was your day bad? And he goes, oh God, you wouldn't even remember. I mean, let me tell you. So what was he doing? He was working out of stress of work, and I usually have good days. I had a sort of bad day that day too. And so we were both, who do you argue with when your stress is like this? The person who's in front of you, right? And who's in front of you? The guy watching me put jalapenos in the stew. And that's who you argue with. My cats don't argue back, so they don't work well. But my husband does. So many times it's just your stress of the day and you're taking it out on your spouse. Now this is the important part. I think your book talks about this, right? Recognize what you did. Tell yourself cognitive dissonance. Forgive yourself. You're not God. You're not perfect. And then don't repeat it. That's the part that's a problem. Do y'all know people who keep marrying the same person? Yeah. I don't mean the same person, you know, Joe. They keep marrying Joe. But they like, oh, Raquel, I got to introduce you to this guy. Oh, he's great. And then you go and you say, my God, he's just like your first husband. No, he's not. He's totally different. In these issues, he's different. I said,
you would say that?
Oh, I do. I said, you're married because they bring them to me to make that judgment. That's what happens when you have a psych degree. I know it's different than a history degree, but in a psych degree, people bring you people and go, you know? And so I'll say, it reminds me of your first husband. And they'll say, but no, in this area, he's very different. And I say, yes, but in these areas, he's very much the same. What are we doing? Cognitive dissonance? We're ignoring that part. We're bringing up this part. People marry the same person over and over again many times. Why? Why do they do that?
They just feel comfortable.
They feel comfortable. That's what they fell in love with, right?
People are afraid of change, changing lifestyle, habits.
And a lot of it is very subconscious. Consciously, I say, yes, I want to change. But subconsciously, it's like, I want to be the same. You know?
I don't know how to pick anybody else.
It's true. Don't repeat it. Marriage. I think this is a really good quote. It's knowing each other's buttons and pressing them repeatedly when you're bored. Do we not do this? It's like we're wandering around the house. I'm bored. I have nothing to do. Let's me go press some buttons. And we do this, right? Now, this is Albert Einstein's quote, which I really like. Women marry men hoping they will change. I will make him the way I want him. And men marry women hoping they won't. And do either of these things happen? None of these things. So now that I've impressed everybody, are there any questions? Yes, ma'am. Do I have kids? Do I look like I have kids? Do I look like I have kids? No. I always think my students, they go, no, you're too happy. I do have 2 cats though. And they take all of our time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If you are here, Professor Kelly, please talk to me. Stephanie Kelly.